Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to go through, Deborah asked me to talk a little bit about the visitor center and give you guys kind of an update on the wetlands. So I kind of wanted to share a few things that are happening or that have been happening past couple of years or so. Um, so first off, I want to talk a little bit about some of the land management activities, because basically, all of the birds that everybody's coming to see, it all hinges upon good land management and making sure that the wetlands are not being overrun with, invasive non-native species. And so certainly Brazilian pepper is always one that is high on our list when we see that. And so recently we released the new biocontrol agent, the Brazilian pepper tree thrips. So we released 7,000 of those in November. And hopefully those will begin feeding on the Brazilian pepper and hopefully help to keep those kind of under control. And when they don't, we go in and let me show you something else. This is a brand new aquatic harvester that we've just purchased, and this is working on some of these floating leaf mats. And one of the things that we have found is that these floating leaf mats, and this is frog, which is a native species, but it tends to do very, very well in the Orlando wetlands. And so once it gets established, it overruns the entire cell. So now the sunlight can't penetrate the water, and basically all that's able to grow in that area is the floating leaved plants. And so we have real issues with the frog's bit and then also Cuban bulrush. And so this is a mechanical way to remove that, which keeps us from having to use chemical controls. And really our goal by using this aquatic plant harvester is we're pulling nutrients out of the wetlands. We're pulling those nutrients which as these plants die, they go to the bottom and form the muck, and they can release nutrients back into the system, which can be not so good. We're actually trying to remove the nutrients. So this is helpful in that regard as well. But really, what we're trying to do is we're trying to promote sunlight to penetrate the water column. And when that happens, we're able to grow submerged aquatic vegetation. This is southern naiad. And you'll see all those little microscopic air bubbles. Well, they're not microscopic, they're macroscopic, but you'll see those little air bubbles. And during the height of photosynthesis, the SAV plants are putting out just tons of oxygen bubbles, and which is really, really good. And these are some of the native species that we're using. These are the ones that we're really trying to promote throughout the wetlands. And I just want you to see what happens when you get a lot of SAV. Oh, well, first there's an alligator. But the SAV plants are, and that's a really cool shot of the nictitating lens on the eyeball there underwater. But as we dive into the wetlands and we see all those SAV plants growing, what we find is that it's refugia for just an amazing array of macroinvertebrates and fish species. And so we do not see this same diversity of wildlife underneath those floating mats. And so by clearing out those floating mats, by increasing the SAV plants, we're providing more of those minnows, those mosquito fish, and a whole variety of other fish species, which then is providing food for all of the birds and the reptiles like the alligator that we see and love in the wetlands. So again, this is just some of the things that staff is always working on. Again, when those floating mats do take over and we can't get to them with the mat, we are targeting them. And here's a list of some of those invasive species that we're always kind of looking after to make sure that the wetlands are being for native species. And we're always looking for that diversity of habitat and the diversity of plant species. Monoculture is never a great thing when it comes to wildlife. But just a real quick blurb on management. Wanted to thank Orange Audubon particularly for the help with our Orlando Wetlands Festival this year. So again, that's already happened back in February, and hope all of y'all were able to come out. It was a great event. Our numbers were down a little bit this year. We probably only had about 2,500 to 3,000 people out for this event, and there's the Orange OAS tent.
Yep.
And we appreciate you guys and all the help and support that you do. And there's your president, Deborah manning the OAS tent. And here's just a few other things. We had Timber Lakes Elementary come out and talk about water, and they were actually able to incorporate their robotics team into that. So if you missed that, that was a really cool kind of demonstration. Of course, we got some photo shots and uh, St. Johns River Water Management District, Graham Williams was kind enough to send out some of their equipment to demonstrate. We had the plant giveaway. We gave away over $5,000 worth of native plants. We had speakers from the Avian Reconditioning Center as well as the Center for Birds of Prey. And of course, we had bounce houses for the kids and all those things. So that was a great thing. So thank you all for the help with that. So next, I wanted to mention the Boardwalk. I heard you mentioned that earlier, and what a great place that has been for bird watching. And never in my wildest dreams did I know what an impact that boardwalk would have on the wetlands and the visitorship of the wetlands. Essentially, in 2022, before the boardwalk was constructed, we had about 45 to 50,000 people. Actually, no, I'm sorry. It was around 38,000 people visited the wetlands in 2022. The next year after it opened, we had 112,000 people visit the wetlands. And again, word got out. There was, extensive news media coverage. And so it just really changed kind of the dynamics of the wetlands and the way that visitors are using it. It caused a lot of stress on staff because we're having to deal with all the people, but it's a good thing. So I see that as an opportunity to do more education and all those great things to let folks know, why the Orlando Wetlands exists and how it exists, how we manage it for wildlife and water quality, water quality being our primary goal, and then wildlife habitat is our secondary goal. So this was all done with a grant through the Florida Recreational Trails grant through FDEP. It's about 2,200 feet long, and it was had a price tag, a really good deal at $660,000, and FDEP paid for half of that. So very exciting addition. And if you haven't been on the boardwalk, I encourage you to come out. So, and those of you that do go, you know what a great thing it's been. So, moving on to the visitor center. So, this has actually been in the works since 2013, is when we requested basically the building. Not, we didn't have this envisioned, but we envisioned, a larger facility where we could bring in school groups and talk to them and educate them about the wetlands and how important wetlands are for mankind and biodiversity. And so that was really the goal of, building this visitor center. And that remains our goal today. So again, we had our grand opening on April 2nd. Finally, it was a much delayed project. It was about 4 years behind schedule. We had some contractual issues with the general contractor, but we finally got those sorted out and we finally got it opened. Um, as you walk up to the building, you will notice that it's cladded in red cedar. And that red cedar all around the building was all cut from either on the Orlando Wetlands or some of it came from Tosahatchee. Um, and so that most of that, a lot of that cedar was already deceased trees that had died in a wildfire that had gotten into the muck and created a muck fire and it killed the trees. So we were able to cut a lot of those trees. We did also take a few select live trees. So again, if as you walk around the forests of the Orlando wetlands, you'd be very hard pressed to actually find where the trees were removed from because we were very, very selective and we moved around the property as we took, a handful of those trees. It was about 30 trees, I believe, that we ultimately cut. All of that, staff did that, myself and Gary Foreman and Cody Bishop cut all those trees. We took them to the sawmill. And so that saved the city probably about $150,000. So that was a pretty exciting project in and of itself. Also, if you'll notice as you walk around the outside of the building, as you walk up to it, you're going to see a variety of wooden benches. And again, as we were cutting trees, we took select trees from around the property and we took one of every kind. So we have everything from cabbage palms to red cedars to cypress to pine to live oak to sweet gum. So there's just a variety of trees, and we made a bench from each kind of tree. And so that's an interesting thing. If you look around the building, you'll notice that variety of trees. And we also added some rocking chairs for your sitting and viewing pleasure of the wetlands. You'll notice as you walk around the building, there's rain chains. So instead of having gutters on the building, we're actually using the runoff to go through the rain chains, and hopefully in the next year or so, we're going to be adding actually a rainwater harvesting system that collects much of the rainwater and puts it into big storage tanks that will be used for irrigation and other purposes. This is a LEED certified building, which is leadership in environmental excellence and design. It's kind of an architectural standard that basically says that the building is going to be very environmentally friendly. So it's very ecological friendly. It has solar panels. It's extremely energy efficient. It has monitoring systems on almost everything. We monitor the amount of water that's being used, the amount of energy that's being used. So there's a lot of sensors throughout the building that shut off the lights and do all those different things. So as you walk into the center, as you walk into the very center of the exhibit hall, this is what if you look up, you'll immediately see some wood storks or silhouettes of wood storks. But then you'll notice there's these large clear story windows up above, and that all that's painted blue to represent the sky. And then as you look down to the floor, you'll notice that it represents water. And so all of this is kind of in keeping with kind of the theme of the wetlands of, the water and the sky and the nature. And so that's what the exhibit hall is meant to represent. As you look around, you'll immediately notice the two large cypress trees. Those trees came from the Orlando Wetlands. We actually harvested those from our hardwood swamp area just for the visitor center. And then we used Rod Beckland's sculptures, and he's a great waterbird sculptor. And so you will see those models throughout the exhibit hall. And he's down in South Florida somewhere, I believe. As you begin to look at the exhibits, you're going to notice that it tells a story. And if you look um, in the, let's see, about the center of the screen at the bottom, you're going to notice there's a computer panel there. And that's actually the influent of the wetlands. And that in real time tells exactly how much water is flowing into the wetlands. And then behind that, you see the tall cattails. That represents the deep marsh. And in the deep marsh, we have some of the animals represented that live in the deep marsh. There's an alligator's nest with baby alligators in it. There is a boat-tail grackle up in the cattails. Then there's also that aquarium that has many of the species that we find in the deep marsh. There's all things like mosquito fish, and there's um, a snapping turtle in that tank. There's all kinds of freshwater grass shrimp that live in that tank as well. So again, look around there, and then down in the case below, you're going to see things like sirens, which is an amphibian that lives in the deep marsh area, along with crayfish. Then as you look to the next set of panels, you're going to see the mixed marsh represented. And so that's going to be represented by pickerelweed and water lilies. And there again, and you'll see the purple gallinule in that area. There's also a limpkin that lives in that area. There's also a touch panel display that talks about the management of the wetlands. And then moving on from the mixed marsh, which again, this represents exactly how the wetlands works, we move into the hardwood swamp. And so that's where you see those two cypress trees. You'll see all the roseate spoonbills. And then you'll also notice the large alligator tank with many of the fish that live in the hardwood swamp area and in that part of the wetlands, along with there's two young alligator hatchlings that live in that tank as well. So there's a shot of our recreated alligator nest. We have a otter swimming with fish in its mouth again. Then if you look around the center, you will look over to your left, you'll see our biodiversity of wetlands display. And so that we have several different cases there. The first case is the aquatic invertebrates and things of the wetlands. So a lot of the insects, dragonflies, crayfish, a lot of our diving beetles, things like that. And then you look into our butterfly display, and all of those specimens are from the Orlando wetlands. And so some of those were purchased, but again, those are the species that we do find in the wetlands. And again, thanks to Randy Snyder and Mary Keim for all of their help in with the butterfly and even some of those aquatic invertebrates. And then we have finally a display on ducks, and we talk about some of the different bills and some of the different adaptations that ducks have that make them uh, excellent in the wetlands. If you look to the other part of the exhibit hall, you'll notice a large wall mural that talks about the water cycle. So it starts off with where does your water come from? It talks about the Florida aquifer, how we pump water from the aquifer, it goes into our house, and then ultimately we waste that water and it goes to a wastewater treatment plant. And for the wetlands, it goes to the Iron Bridge Water Reclamation Facility. And then ultimately it goes to the wetlands. And then here's a large touch panel display. It's all interactive where you can touch that panel and learn about the Orlando wetlands. And it talks about the flow, how the water flows through the wetlands, all the different control structures, all the different hiking trails. There's just a lot of information on that touch panel screen. And then ultimately how that water moves into the St. Johns River and then ultimately out to the Atlantic Ocean. There's also a predator and prey display that you'll notice that shows some of the animals that we find in the wetlands. And so everything from great horned owls to what they eat. And it's a little bit of a guessing game when you look around and read through the panels. There's a skunk, there's a black bear, there's a bobcat and coyote. There's even some snakes in that display. And there again, there's some of those stuffed mounted animals, and some of those actually did come from the wetlands. We have our Friends of the Orlando Wetlands, which is our volunteer group. We have a kind of a merchandise area where you can walk into the exhibit hall and purchase some of that, and that helps to support our incredible volunteers who give those tours routinely on Fridays and Saturdays this time of the year. Oh, there's that water cycle. And there's just some of the shots from around the center as people are looking around, enjoying we've been very, very impressed with the flow of people coming in, enjoying the exhibits. There's also a video that's available for watch, and we actually have a wide variety of videos that you're able to request. And then finally, as you look at the last panel, it shows the live stream of the water actually leaving the wetlands, and it gives you the million gallons per day, how many gallons we actually discharge, and it talks about some of the other parameters that we're monitoring as the water goes out. And our whole goal is for that water to leave cleaner than when it came in. Also in the back of the building, which this is not open to the public area, but we do have some offices. That's my office, as messy as my desk is. We have a conference room, and that is a table, again, built from the red cedar that we cut from there on the property. Myself and Cody Bishop were able to build that table, and it has live edge, so we're kind of excited to use that. We have a classroom on the other end of the building, and this was, again, why the building was built was so that we could do more education for school groups specifically. And we've been able to use this for our volunteer group. Our incredible FOWs have grown to about 80 people strong and continues to grow. So we're super, super excited about that. It also has a kitchenette for helping to provide food. So we had the grand opening, and Mayor Buddy Dyer came out and helped welcome in the building and cut the ribbon. So that was a great day. There's many of our volunteers sitting behind him. And he also honored Mr. Gary Foreman. He's kind of my right-hand man at the wetlands. He oversees a lot of the land management, and he celebrates 35 years with the city of Orlando this month. And he's been at the wetlands for 21 years working with me. So the Orlando Wetlands continues. This is last year, pumped over 7 billion gallons. This is the pump station that moves the water 17 miles out to the Orlando Wetlands. And those pumps put out about 2,000 horsepower. It takes about 2,000 horsepower to move that kind of water, about 20 million gallons per day. when we look at the statistics, again, about that 20 million gallons a day coming into the wetlands, we had about 40 inches of rain, but then we only had about 16 million gallons a day leaving the wetlands, which means we lost about 7.3 million gallons per day. Now, I like this because that 7.3 million gallons is putting that water vapor back into the atmosphere. Again, it helps to create that microclimate that many of the bird species need, that many of the wildlife, I believe that, and this is not something that a lot of people know much about. I don't know much about it, but I think a lot of the birds are actually attracted to some of these microclimates, again, based on what the wetlands are doing, the amount of vapor, water vapor that they're pumping out through evapotranspiration. So again, we're continuing to do wood stork monitoring at the wetlands. We fly with a drone almost every week to check on our wood storks. And what we're doing that for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We're helping to count the number of birds we have, the number of nests, and then ultimately the number of chicks. And so this is what our data looks like as we went through last year's monitoring. And then for last year's season, we had 33 um, total nests with total number of fledged birds was 221. 112 total successful nests. I'm sorry, that's the answer we were looking for. 61.5% of the nests were successful. So those were really good numbers when compared to a lot of other sites. And again, it's kind of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has even acknowledged that many of these man-made created wetland treatment systems are providing an incredible, valuable resource for some of our critically endangered species. In fact, the wood stork, we've been working on a report to help delist the wood stork from threatened, where it comes off of the threatened and endangered list. So again, it's because of places like the Orlando Wetlands. With that, I will end it and offer up any questions. That's just a few of the things we have going on.
Thank you. That was
Yes, thank you. Emily Schwartz had a question. She said, you mentioned the tours. Are they walking tours or do you still have motorized tours?
Our Friends of the Orlando Wetlands offer motorized. We have those 15 passenger shuttle buses. They're electric trams, and those run on Fridays and Saturdays. And we just changed that. We're just changing the times. It's going to start at 8 a.m. and go till about 2 p.m. in the afternoon on Fridays and Saturdays. And this going into our summer months, we drop Sundays, but during the winter months, we also include Sundays.
All right, and
Free of
Marty,
charge, free of charge.
yeah, those are great. Marty said he didn't realize the wood stork was threatened.
Yeah, it's like I said, they're working to delist that and take it off of the threatened and endangered list. So at one point it was endangered not too awful long ago.
Oh, so they're doing well.
Yeah.
Alan asked, how did you get your stuffed animals? Did you need a special permit?
So yes, for some of them we do. A lot of times you'll need a salvage permit from the state, which basically means you can collect roadkill. And again, each of those animals came to us in a variety of ways. Worked with the Fish and Wildlife Commission to obtain the black bear. That was actually a nuisance bear that had to be put down, and we were able to turn that into something. But then, you're not allowed to just collect a dead bird off the side of the road because that falls under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Migratory Act. So there's a lot of different rules and regulations about collecting those animals, and so I wouldn't recommend that to the average person.
Yeah, I think he's thinking of our new visitor center.
Yeah, it's something I would say, yeah, you could certainly talk to the agencies, the uh, Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And they can help you obtain those permits. They're relatively easy, but there's some record keeping, and so you've got to kind of track it. like every specimen that's picked up, you've got to keep log books. And then, of course, you've got to get those to the taxidermist, and taxidermists are very particular on, you know, how, what kind of shape that the animal is in. So a lot of roadkill can't be used because maybe there's too many broken bones or things when it's been hit by a car. And again, they have to be fresh. They can't be a day or two old because then the ants get into them. And so there's a lot of kind of requirements. It's not easy. It's taken me years and years to collect all those specimens.
Hmm.
Also worked with wildlife rehabilitators. That's another good option for obtaining some of the animals.
Hmm. Very good. Now, what is your favorite place in the park?
Oh boy, that's a really tough question. There's so many. The Northwoods Branch, which is an area, it's kind of in the northeast corner of the Orlando Wetlands. Not a lot of people get up there. It is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. So,
Hmm. Very good. All right. Any other questions?
Mark, I understood that some of the water was going to be diverted for reclaimed water, and I was worried about that as it seems like it hasn't been too damaging.
no, we're always in discussion with Orange County. There's a huge what they call the arid system, which is the Eastern Regional, I won't say this right, but it's the Eastern Regional Water Reclamation Distribution System. Essentially, it's just massive pipes that run around, like down Alafaya Trail, the east part of Orange County, and then they are able to move that water basically from the east part of the county all the way out to Claremont to the water conserve area, the water conserve 2 area distribution area. And so there's always discussions going on about how much water is needed where. And so the city of Orlando is very committed to providing reclaimed water where we can, to as many customers as we can. That is, the St. Johns River Water Management District has been very active in that, water supply planning, because every gallon of water that we can offset with reclaimed water, um, impacts the amount of water that is being pulled out of the ground, out of the aquifer. And so there's a big push to provide that reclaimed water. Um, However, the city is also committed to maintaining the Orlando wetlands because it's a function of, during the dry season, everybody wants water. Everybody's irrigating their yard. Everybody wants water. But as soon as the rainy season shows up, all the irrigation kind of shuts down, and now we've got to deal with all the water. And so it would be one thing if the reclaim system, maintained the amount of water that is used all year long, but it doesn't work that way. And so what we're seeing is that the Orlando wetlands during the dry part of the year, which is right now, we do see our flows coming way down as we're supplying more of the water to the reclaimed system. Um, so there is kind of always this struggle, this push and pull of, how do we manage the water? Where does it go? But we are committed to maintaining the wetlands because you can't just shut the wetlands off. We've actually done a lot of testing, in the Orlando wetlands where we've shut it down. We've shut cells off. We allow them to dry up. We're actually doing a test right now where we're drying up cell number 12. Uh, and so when the wetlands dry up, uh, the organic matter at the bottom of the wetlands begins to oxidize. And then you can end up releasing nutrients back into the water column once it becomes rehydrated or reflooded. That's okay in a natural setting because that's exactly what happens in our natural wetlands. They go through this kind of cyclic condition, most every year where they're flooded and then they dry out, then they desiccate, and then they get reflooded. And however, in these kind of man-made artificial wetland treatment systems, that's not necessarily a good thing because we have more stored nutrients in those, in that muck, in that organic matter at the bottom of the cell. So if you dry that out and you release that, you just lost all of the ground that you had made by removing those nutrients. I hope that makes sense. I'm not doing a very good job explaining it, but
Okay, but my issue is more of the amount of water, and I wish that people would conserve and not necessarily use so much on their lawns. But so you said 19 million gallons is the current rate, and what was the most that it was?
oh, we can, like during some of the hurricanes and storms, there's so much water in the system that everybody's scrambling, how do we get rid of it? And there's times when our pump stations are, at maximum capacity and they may be pumping 36 million gallons a day to the wetlands.
So it's flood control as well.
Yeah, not so much flood control. It's more just dealing with, you have so much sewage basically in the sewer lines. And it's not sewage, but it's runoff from all the streets. So you think about every street has a manhole. Well, when those streets get flooded, the water finds its way down into the manholes and ends up in the sewer system. So instead of having just sewage, you have a lot of stormwater in that system that we're now having to treat and then take care of that water as well. So
Okay.
it dilutes the sewage that's in the system, but again, it causes just huge problems from a water management standpoint.
And it's the plants that take the nutrients out.
You in a very simplistic manner, that answer would be correct. It's way more than just the plants, though. There's a whole
Uh-huh.
biogeochemical world that
Oh,
is,
yeah, you taught me about periphyton.
yeah, periphyton. I mean, there's adsorption to the soils. There's all kinds of minerals in the soil that are grabbing phosphorus and things like that. And so there's just a lot of different mechanisms that help us to remove nutrients. And again, that's one of the reasons that we're trying to promote some of those submerged aquatic plants. We have found that those do incredible things at removing nutrients,
Mhm.
far and above how better than like our emergent plants like the cattails and the bulrush and the pickerweed and those types of things. So
How often do you have to, I know I was there, oh, I can't remember how many years ago, and you were digging out a cell. I don't know if that's what you call it, but you emptied it and
right, that's a
cleaned the
deep.
bottom out of all the stuff that settled. And how often do you have to do that in the cells?
So probably as an average, we would say every 20 years for each cell.
Hmm.
And some of those cells we've never demucked in 37 years. And then we have, some of those cells we've demucked twice in 37 years. So there's a lot that goes into that calculation as to when and where we're going to demuck.
And the whole design by cells was so that you could separately treat the different cells, right?
It was the different cells, so the 18 different treatment cells were actually designed based on the topography. So the wetlands is sloped about 15 feet from the beginning to the end. And so the cells are arranged on about a 3 foot contour. So because you don't want the water to be, 5 and 6 feet deep. We only want it to be about 3 feet deep at the maximum. And so that's why the cells are configured the way that they are. Now, there were also different flow trains. So we have 3 different flow paths that the water can take through the wetlands. Um, and so that's why it was arranged the way that it is. So
Oh, Ellen also wanted to know who designed your educational displays.
we contracted with NASL, which is a large company. They're an exhibit design and construction company here in Orlando. They do a ton of work for Universal Studios and Disney World. They, they were flying over to Japan and doing, um, what was it? I was trying to remember. It was um, Frozen. I think they built a Frozen set in the Japan Disney World. That's one of the projects they were working on when we were meeting with them. Then they hired a company called Main Street Design out of, I believe it was Massachusetts. And we worked with Main Street Design. We had several seminars where we sat down with their designers kind of over Zoom and went back and forth, and we educated them about the wetlands and told them the things that we thought were important to get across in our messaging. And they put together the plan, the overall design. That design was then given back to NASL. NASL then figures out how to build all the cabinets, how to build and make the vision kind of come to life. And then NASL, once all that's approved, then they came in and actually built all of the cabinetry, and so they worked, NASA was kind of the prime, like Bottled Ocean, which was a aquarium company that actually built the different tanks and fish tanks that we have. Um, and so yeah, they coordinated all of that.
Yeah.
And we had a budget, just so you know, of inside for the exhibit hall area for all the exhibitry. Our budget was right at $500,000 for all of the exhibitry.
Good to
All
know.
right. Um, oh, and of course, you wanted to know if you have any extra animals we can borrow for our display center. I think he's just kidding. And Emily wants to know, Sweetwater Wetlands in Gadenville is celebrating their 10-year anniversary this weekend with free admission. So she just wanted to let everybody know. And that's again another good wetlands, good place for seeing birds throughout the country. You find one of these wetlands, they all seem to be very good for the birds.
And yours was the pioneer.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Definitely so. Yeah, Sweetwater. And then now there's the Ocala wetlands. So check that
yeah,
one out.
yeah,
That's a
that's
new
one.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, all those are based.
Hatchie, Green K are really great.
Hatchie, yeah, yeah.
That's got a woodstruck rookery now. I really expanded.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, do you have any big plans for the future or not that you haven't had a lot already?
Yeah, we're just trying to get our heads wrapped around what we've done.
Okay.
So right now, no. I mean, we are going to be the next thing that to come is we're planning to tear down the old education center, which was an old Orange County school portable that I was able to purchase for $100. So that's the building that we've been working out of. We're going to tear that down, and we're actually going to rebuild that with a metal building. And that will become a storage facility, but also hopefully a launching point for all of our tours. And so that hopefully will come in the next year or so. Again, we're just continuing to work on various wildlife habitat projects. We're trying to reintroduce bobwhite quail into the wetlands. When I started out there, quail were everywhere. And it's been years and years since I've seen a covey of quail. I'm not sure that if it's the coyotes that have done a number on them or exactly what the problem is, but that's one of the things that we're working on, so as well.
Orange Audubon took a tour recently with Gilberto on the trams.
Right.
And he told us that the trams were paid for by donations to the Friends.
Yes, that's an amazing story when you look at how we've been able to run the Friends of the Orlando Wetlands and how that has kind of morphed and grown. We have never charged, for any of those tours. Our model has always been we're simply asking for donations. And it's just been absolutely outstanding. We now have a fleet of 5 of those 15 passenger golf carts. We have 2 more 8 passenger golf carts, and then we have a utility golf cart. All of that was paid for with donation money. And we're talking tens and $20 bills that people give us out of their pocket. So it's been just phenomenal how that's worked. So
Now, were you there when they started the trams, or was that something that was there before you came?
no, there was Dave Simpson. I know he's on here. He can tell you. I think he may have led probably the first bird tour out there at the wetlands with Deborah Levy. But yeah, there was the city Parks Department was involved early on, and I think again, David Simpson could tell you about that. He led some of those earliest tours. But then there was kind of a parting of the ways. The Parks Department kind of became de-involved. They weren't involved with the wetlands, and so the Water Reclamation Department sort of took over, and that's when around the time when I was hired in, which was around 1998. Um, and so we've just little by little grown, and we started off with uh, just giving tours out of the back of a pickup truck. We would set people on hay bales and drive them around the wetlands, and we would interpret what we were seeing. And, it was a great week if we had 100 people visit the wetlands. So that was a huge week for us. And so it's grown, from that into what it is now. And again, a lot of that, I will say, is really because of the habitat management. When I took over a lot of the wetlands, it had some great habitat because we had flooded all these old, oak and cedar trees, which provided the structure for a lot of the nesting. That's when we had purple martins naturally nesting in the wetlands
And is
back in
that
those days.
continue or have they been ousted by other birds?
The martins seem to be gone. We did a big effort push here about 2 years ago to try and get them back into those trees because we still do see martins showing up in the springtime, but it doesn't seem that they're nesting at the well. And I think more it's a function of many of those trees have fallen down just over time. Most of those trees were dead, and they just, again, the habitat's gone away for the nesting of the purple martins. Um, but again, that the whole system was pretty well taken over with cattails. And so little by little, we've really focused on opening up different areas. We now have much more variety of habitats in the wetlands, which again has really promoted a diversity of bird species.
And you plant the native plants?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're constantly moving plants around the wetlands. As I come across maybe native species that we don't have, sometimes I'll bring those into the wetlands and plant them. And I can tell you horror stories of things that I've done that I shouldn't have done, like bringing in the native Mexican water lily. I planted that in the wetlands years and years ago, and now we're fighting it nonstop. So, I've made plenty of mistakes. But
Very
so
good.
there it goes.
So most of your money, Ellen was asking, most of them came from small donations, or did you get any big grants?
For the Friends of the Wetlands and all those cart purchases, we've got a handful of like corporate grants of maybe like $500. We may have had a couple of them that are $1,000, but nothing significant. We're not getting a lot of those. I mean, we get a handful of those here and there. But we've had a few people contact us about leaving the Orlando Wetlands and the Friends of the Orlando Wetlands in their will and in their estate planning. And so that's, something um, that we're excited about. Well, not that's how do you word that? We're not excited
No,
about that,
I
but we are.
understand. Yeah. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah, Alan, it's a city of Orlando property, so the building would have been paid for by the city.
Correct. Yeah, the building, the exhibit, yeah, the visitor center, all that's paid for, not with tax money, but with water reclamation funds. So everything that you see happening at the Orlando Wetlands is paid for by the City of Orlando Water Reclamation Division, which is part of it's not the general fund, so it's not general tax money. It doesn't come out of your property tax. It comes from wastewater fees. And so again, a lot of your businesses are paying commercial uh, fees and things. And when you look at how much you pay for sewage, on your bill, like your sewage and water, it's super inexpensive for the amount of effort, the amount of infrastructure that goes in to move all that wastewater and to build those treatment plants. Um, it's one of the best values that I think you'll find out there.
Well, great.
Yeah, and a great birding environment too.
Yeah,
Right.
we've been talking a lot about the hydrology. If anybody that's still on wants to ask more bird-related questions, please do.
I can talk just a little bit about a few of the bird things that are going on. You know, we have the roseate spoonbills. We probably have around 150 active nests this year.
Nice.
So quite a large number of spoonbills. You know, we have a yellow crown night heron juvenile, so we've had some nesting of yellow crowns, which is don't know that we've had those in the last several years, so that's exciting. Again, the wood storks are nesting. We've started to have eastern bluebirds showing up, so I'm super excited. I've been wanting those to nest in the wetlands for a very long time. Um, and it just seems we put out boxes for them and they never seem to show up. So that's exciting. And then of course, you know, we've had a lot of all the other regulars, all the wading birds, and there's an eastern phoebe that's nesting right out my office right now, so that's fun to watch.
Oh, very good. I will
Yeah.
have to say, I did see a red belly woodpecker trying to open the hole on one of your bluebird boxes, but you did put metal around the opening, so it wasn't going well. It was a little thwarted.
That's funny.
Um, All right. Any other questions?
Will the Wetlands Festival always be every other year? Any chance of having it every year?
Oh boy.
A lot of work, I know.
That is a lot of work, and I will tell you the fate of the Wetlands Festival probably very much in question. We, how do I explain this? The festival was created. The original intent behind the festival was to reach out to the local community to educate them about the Orlando wetlands. Because the town of Christmas in the earliest days was very much against the wetlands project.
Oh,
Um, because again, they looked at it as here comes the city of Orlando wastewater in our backyard. So I can understand the sentiment. And so part of my job when I was hired on was to reach out and smooth things over with the Christmas community, you know, kind of ease those tensions. And so that's really what led to the creation of the Wetlands Festival. We've long since passed that goal. So it's become, you know, kind of this great celebration, national event of the wetlands. It is a monster to put on. And it costs a significant amount of money. We probably spend, I want to say, $15,000 to put that event on, if I added everything up. Now we do get corporate sponsorship for that event, but one of the things that staff we would like to do is create some smaller events throughout the year that would replace the festival. Now, I don't know if I'm going to get my way on this, but that's what Mark Sees would like to do. But I will tell you, the Wetlands Festival has become so very popular that some of the political powers in the city of Orlando have said, you're going to do a Wetlands Festival. So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
But again, you know, some of those smaller events, we could look at some partnerships, you know, with OAS to get you guys involved. And you guys have been huge partners with us, and I will certainly never ever
a lot
forget
of our
that.
members are your volunteers.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many of our, exactly.
I know they were waiting. I think that we met one and she was like, oh, I'm going to be a volunteer at the new center. So she couldn't wait for it to open to start. So it's very
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Well, thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right. Night, everybody.
Good night.
Here.